elderforpresident.com, elderforpresident.com,
And
elderforpresident.com. Larry,
and
let's get
Carl,
into why.
Carl, you're right. You can also go to LarryElder.com if you like. So either
Okay,
LarryElder.com or ElderForPresident.com. And by the way, regarding
okay.
my age, I've told people that the elder the berry, the sweeter the juice. Oh, he went there. Oh, he went there.
All right, Larry, you gotta let me get through this interview with some without laughing. All right, I gotta be honest with you. That might be a moniker that you want to take on the campaign trail. All right. Okay, all right. Let's get to the reasons why you decided to get into the race. Obviously, this is a big deal. You are running for the most powerful office in the entire world. Hopefully, it'll still be that way after Joe Biden's presidency. But you are running for the most powerful office in the world. Why did you decide to jump into this race?
Well, you touched on it when you made the comment about Joe Biden. What he's done to this nation in the last 2.5 years is unbelievable. I didn't think you could damage a nation in that short a period of time the way this man did. It's not just
Yeah.
the border. There's 5 million illegal aliens in the country. You don't know who they are, where they are. Some number of them are on the terror watch list. We know that because we apprehended dozens who have been on. The ones who've gotten away who are on the list, we have no idea. What he's done with suggesting that states shut down the government because of COVID. Kids have lost a whole year of in-school education, almost 2 years in some places in math and in reading. We're already behind. You know, Carl, 85% of black eighth graders, these are kids who are 13 years old, are neither math nor reading proficient at grade level. Half of them aren't even basic math proficient, which means a substantial number of 13-year-old black kids are functionally illiterate. And they were denied a whole year or two of in-person education because of the way so many governors, at the behest of the CDC and Dr. Fauci, shut down their economies and shut down their schools. And then we've got this inflation, paying people not to work, this war on oil and gas, meaning that we're now paying 50% more for gas prices. At one time, it was 100% more. And the way he pulled out of Afghanistan, in my opinion, encouraged Putin to invade Ukraine and is encouraging Xi Jinping to invade Taiwan. So they feel that he's weak. Our allies don't trust him because he didn't inform them that he was going to pull out from Afghanistan, and our enemies don't fear us. So for all those reasons, I feel that I have a moral, a patriotic, and a religious obligation to do something.
You
I
know
know
what,
they
Larry?
sound. Go ahead.
I'm glad you said what you just said because a lot of people will say, "Well, listen, you've got Trump, you've got DeSantis, and I sit there and say, listen, I want the fighters in the race. I believe what the Bible says that iron sharpens iron, and frankly, I do believe that if God has tugged on someone's heart to run for the presidency, they need to do it, regardless of the outcome, frankly, because you never know if your issues need to be debated on that stage. And I can say one thing about you, and you've already made mention of it. I don't hear enough of the candidates from the Republican Party talking about the issues that exist within the inner city, if you will. And I think these and maybe I know that they're aware of them, but you come with the facts, you come with the stats. I think these are things that are going to be very important for Republicans to start touching on. And so that's why I think your presence on the stage will be extremely important, Larry. I want to get to some other issues. Let's talk about crime. That's one of the issues that you mentioned. And then racial harmony is another issue. So talk about those two things, if you would.
Well, regarding crime, because of these soft on crime DAs, these people that George Soros has backed, and the soft on crime rhetoric from people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who at one time said she wanted to reimagine the police, cops are pulling back. The police have never been more demoralized. People are quitting, or they're transferring to other departments. You can't recruit because nobody wants to work for a department that is allegedly systemically racist. Cops are pulling back. It's called the George Floyd effect, or the Black Lives Matter effect. And as a result, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of black people who are dead, Carl, who would not be dead if the police were doing their normal proactive policing. 81% of black people want the police manpower to remain the same or to be increased. So you're talking about a minority of black people who are anti-cop. The majority of law-abiding, hardworking, tax-paying, drug-abstaining, crime-abstaining black people want more police. So this rhetoric is hurting the very people that people on the left claim that they care about. We don't talk about the crime. Half of the
That,
homicides in the country are by and against black people. A young black man between 10 and 34 years old, Carl, is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a young white man in the same demo. And almost always the black murdered person is murdered by another black person, not by the police. So crime is hurting black people more than anybody else. It's causing people not to move to certain areas. It's causing businesses to leave. And it's causing black people to be killed. And there are a whole bunch of people who are on the streets who shouldn't be on the streets, but for these soft on crime DAs, things like cashless bail. So you have a bunch of people who are roaming around who shouldn't be there in the first place. Regarding racial harmony, despite my being referred to as a black face of white supremacy by the LA Times, I'm acutely aware that I am a black person and would be a black president if I am successful in my quest. And what I'm going to do is what Obama did not do. I won't be saying that.
amen.
Racism is in America's DNA, which is what he said. If I had a
Right.
son who looked like Trayvon, the Cambridge police acted stupidly. He embraced Black Lives Matter, embraced Al Sharpton, to the point where when he entered office, both blacks and whites thought race relations would improve. When he left, both blacks and whites thought things got worse because Obama made this country less harmonious because of his rhetoric.
Yep.
I mean, if anybody should be proud of America and happy that he's born and raised here, is this guy who went to the finest prep school in Hawaii, came down to LA, goes to Occidental for 2 years, finishes up at Columbia, goes to Harvard Law, where he becomes the president of the Harvard Law Review, runs for governor, runs for senator in Illinois, gets elected, and then before he knew where the bathroom was, runs for president and gets elected. What's he complaining about? He ought to be praising America to the heights. Instead, he's talking about all this nonsense. And the number one problem facing the black community is fatherlessness. 70% of black kids enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. And Obama knows this because one time he gave a speech where he talked about the higher number of
We
blacks
got a minute left, Larry.
dropping out, ending up in jail because they're not being raised without a father. His first book was all about his angst about not knowing his biological father very well and his dad not being in his life. So Obama should have been talking about that. He wasn't. I will.
All right, welcome back to the Officer Tatum Show, formerly known as the Larry Elder Show. I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for the Officer Tatum. I'm sticking that's 2 times in a row, Larry. That is 2 times in a row. All right.
I'm also impressed you're able to pronounce Vivek's last name. I still haven't been able to do it.
Hey, it took me a little practice. I'm not going to lie, but once I got it down, I stuck that landing too, Larry. All right. Now, you know what? Real quick, we were talking about inflation, Larry, but there was a follow-up that I wanted to ask as far as crime was concerned. One of my fears is I don't want a nationalized police force of any sort. That's not what you're talking about when you're the president of the United States. You're not looking for a nationalized police force. Are you? Explain that a little bit, if you will.
No, all I'm looking to do is to encourage with the bully pulpit various cities to do their job. I mean, the number one job of government is to protect people and property. You have all these soft on crime DAs, the Kim Foxx in Chicago. You did have Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, George Gascon here in Los Angeles, Alvin Bragg in New York. And they're letting a bunch of people go. They're lowering down a bunch of felonies into misdemeanors. They're not doing their job. Now, a lot of them get federal dollars. And I can do an executive order. I'm not fond of executive orders, but you can't take federal dollars if you're not doing your job when your primary job is to fight crime. So we can do something at that level that way. But more importantly, it's a rhetoric. Yeah. I think that Obama things with his anti-cop rhetoric, and to the point where his last term, you might remember, there were 5 officers in Dallas that were shot and killed execution style by a black man who was motivated by the lie that the police were engaging in systemic racism. There were 2 officers in New York who were sitting in their cars, Officers Lou and Ramos. Black guy comes up, blows him away, and based on social media, he also thought that the police were killing black people. And there were 3 officers killed in Baton Rouge, all by 3 different black men, all of whom felt, because of the rhetoric that they heard, that the police were mowing down black people just because they're black. So this rhetoric has a real world consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I recall correctly, Larry, if you go back to the Dallas shooting, those officers were protecting, if I recall, a Black Lives Matter protest.
That's
So
right.
I mean,
And the police chief in Dallas was black. They'd already
that's
gone
right.
through training, calling for non-lethal responses. All the things you want cops to do, they were doing, and they still got killed by a black guy who was angry over the lie that the police were engaging in systemic racism against black people.
One of the things I love too, Larry, I must admit, you see people like, obviously Dr. Ben Carson has run for the White House. The late, great Herman Cain did as well. I really think it's important for people to see, and I'm not one that racializes a lot of stuff, frankly, but I do think it's important for people to see faces of black people where it's just like we're having a conversation on policy issues, not always racial issues. And that's what I love about yourself. I know you can go on stage and represent well because honestly, I think it is far more important that people know what's in your head, if you will, and what's in your heart, as opposed to just focusing on the color of one's skin. It drives me insane. I felt like racism pretty much in America was over, if you will. Obviously, there's always going to be racists, but until Obama came into office. So anyway, let's go back to inflation here, Larry. I wanted you to finish up on that point. Then I want to tackle more of your issues, if you don't mind.
Well, inflation is classic definition is too much money chasing too few goods. And you can stop printing money. You can also increase the supply of goods and services. One of the reasons we have had higher prices is because I said earlier of this war on oil and gas that Joe Biden has done. One of the first things he did was to stop leasing on federal lands. He shut down Keystone Pipeline. And he, of course, is not going to have drilling in Anwar. And as a result, we've gone from being energy independent to energy dependent and caused gas prices to go up. One of the big things that Donald Trump did, which made the economy do well, is because he reduced so many regulations. Now, these are the kinds of things that people can't see. It's not real sexy.
Right.
But look at
Right.
the regulations that Donald Trump reversed or reduced, and the ones that Joe Biden has reversed. It gives you an idea of one of the reasons we're having so much inflation. So lowering the cost of doing business, lowering regulations, lowering taxes, and not paying people not to work would be the recipe that I would be pursuing in order to get this economy juice back up again.
Okay, we have 30 seconds before the break. I don't know if you can stay with me for another segment or if you have to go. Let's talk about the economy real quickly here, Larry. Economic growth. How would
Well,
you make it happen?
Well, again, lowering taxes, lowering spending, pushing for an amendment to fix spending to a certain percentage of our GDP so that we can tie the hands of both Democrats and Republicans who love to spend. One of the things that happened during the pandemic is that Joe Biden paid people not to work. There was a study done by Bank of America that said if you earn $30,000 or less, you made more money staying on home, sitting on your butt than being out there working.
We got to get out, Larry.